Took a little while.
I'm so, I'm so happy that you did not give up. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Team Ferguson. I'm so happy. How are you doing? How are you doing?
Oh, we're doing well. I don't live in New York City. I live on Long Island, which is, but not far from New York City, about 40 miles. And I go into the city quite a bit. At least I did, not now. But yeah, we're in a lockdown. We're opened up a little bit, but I keep very busy. You know, between just working around and my Christian youth website and a couple of books I'm writing and work I do at the church. I have no problem keeping busy.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy. So let's go straight to why we are here. Who is Team Ferguson? Who is Team? Who is Team? So that people can know who you are.
Who am I? Well, I grew up in a Baptist church many years ago, and I was very involved there. And when I went to college, went to a Lutheran college, and I learned things there through a couple of courses that I took. And when I came out and returned home, when I returned home, my family had left the Baptist church, and so I had to go searching for a new church. And it's kind of a long story, but it's kind of a short story also, because I went to a church for about 4 or 5 weeks, and local Presbyterian church, and I asked the minister if they had a group for college age individuals, because I was just out of college and I really didn't have too many friends. I'd been away for a long time. And he said, no, there isn't one. But then I came back a week later and he said, you know that group for college age kids? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, we have one now. And I said, that's great. Who's going to be in it? And he said, you and me. And that was it. So the minister and I kind of went about it to make that part of my life a short story. It ended up 3 years later being a Christian coffee house that was getting about 25 to 40 young people every Friday and every Sunday night. The Friday night group was high school and the Sunday night group was college. And it was a very meaningful thing. I never made a penny on it. I never got paid. But that was okay, because I did it because I felt God was calling me there. And then I really had a challenge because about 3.5 years in, the group was changing and the older group was gone, and we had mostly junior high kids. And a dear friend of mine came to me and said, you know, Tim, it's time to move on. And I said, oh, that's a tough one for me. And I prayed about it that night. I remember I must have been on my knees for a good hour or two. And I prayed about it, and it just came to me. The Spirit talked to me and said, I want you to go out and take the next apartment you find that you can afford, as long as it's within a half-hour drive of my place of business. And so I did that. And I looked, it took me 6 weeks, and I found an apartment. And it was in a place called Babylon, New York. I had no idea where Babylon really was. I had never heard of it. But I remember I said, I'll take the first one I can afford. It's within a half-hour drive, and I took it. And that day I drove home to my apartment where I had been living, and I passed a little white church on the corner. And I looked at it and I said, well, I've got to introduce myself to my new home. So I said, I guess I should go to that church. And I felt I should go to that church the next day. I went home, it was a Saturday afternoon. And the next morning I woke up and I almost didn't go. But I said, no, I'm going to go. I hopped in my car and I drove about a half hour to get there. And I sat in the back row, because that's what we all do when we go to a new church. We always sit in the back row. And I'm sitting there, and a gentleman was speaking. And the gentleman got about halfway through his service, and he said, you know, what I really like is listen to young people. And I was a young person back then. This is 1973. I like listening to young people playing their guitars during the breaks. And I had been playing guitar for about 6-7 years. I was involved in a coffee house. Don't go to a coffee house without playing guitar back then. So my ears came up, and I said, gee, this is getting interesting. And then he said what was unbelievable. He said, I hear they're going to start a coffee house in town. And I thought our church should get in back of it. And here I was leaving a coffee house. I was going to an unknown place, unknown town, unknown church, because I felt God was calling me. And the first day I'm there, they offer a coffee house. And the funny thing was, there really was no coffee house. He got the wrong word. It was a youth center. But because he said coffee house, the next week I spoke to the pastor at the church, said, I hear they're going to start a coffee house. And I've been doing that for the last 3 years. And he said, there's no coffee house here. But he something about the way I talked attracted him. And 2 weeks later, he asked me in his office with 5 high school young people graduating from high school. Said, well, can you do something here? Well, 12 years later, we had 12 years of a coffee house, and a group, a Christian coffee house, where we had average attendance between 15 and 25. And then time went on, and I became a single parent. I had a 2 and a 5-year-old son, and I had to pass that coffee house on to somebody else, as I was raising 2 boys alone. And then another 7 years went by, and the coffee house had closed, and they needed a youth director. And they called me in. They said, will you do it? I said, can I have my coffee house room back? And they said, yeah. And that was 20 years of running that youth group. And that did close after 20 years, but every Sunday night for 20 years, we had 15 to 25 young people joining with us. And a result of that was a couple of books that I wrote and a Christian youth website. And it's been a very fulfilling life that I've had. And that's just part of my faith journey.
Wow. I'm so inspired. That's awesome. Wonderful. I understand you witnessed Billy Graham crusade. Tell us more about those crusades.
Tell you more about, I'm sorry?
Billy Graham's crusade.
The crusade? I'm not understanding. I can tell you.
The Billy Graham crusade. We understand you witnessed it.
Billy Graham, yes. I was very young. This was way back in 1958 or 59. But I do remember my dad. We came to Long Island because my dad wanted to be a minister, and he went to Philadelphia Baptist Seminary, and we got a job out here on Long Island. He did. And it unfortunately didn't work out that well. I was so young, I'm not sure exactly why. But we went from that church to a Baptist church, and we did go to the Billy Graham Crusades back in the late 50s. And that was a trip for us. It was in Madison Square Garden, and I lived even further away, so it was about an hour and a half ride. And of course, trying to find parking space was a challenge in the middle of New York City. I do remember going, and what I distinctly remember, because I was probably about 10 years old, what I remember is the music. The music was unbelievable. Billy Graham had a choir there, and the choir was made up of people from all the churches around New York City. And that choir had about 3,000 singers in it. And he would just have them come a couple of hours before the show, or not the show, but before the service, and practice. And they sang the same songs all the time, but they sang them so well you could hear them over and over again. I remember Just As I Am, Without One Plea. They always ended the service with that. And then the choir would back George Beverly Shea, who would sing How Great Thou Art. Now, interestingly, I did follow Billy Graham for many years, but I never got a chance to see Billy Graham again, except for one time. And that time was, we have friends from our church that are very strong Christian. The gentleman has a very strong Christian faith. He's from Guyana and came here, and he married a wife who has a strong Hindu faith.